أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dear friends, welcome to Idea Foundation Forum. Today we will discuss the research topic 6 major reasons of the Muslims' decadence under the fourth subtopic non-participative, non-inclusive attitudes. Equalitarianism as the doctrine of the equality of the mankind in the socio-economic and political spheres of life has been the hallmark of Islamic teachings and the prime purpose of the ibadat or the pillars of Islam. The Quran, Sunnah, especially the farewell sermon of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, provide necessary intellectual base to build this doctrine, while ibadat help train the Muslims for practicing this doctrine in all socio-economic and political affairs. This doctrine negates social stratification, elitism, culture of distinctions and privileges, exclusivities, and concentration of wealth and power. While it promotes pluralism, inclusiveness, socio-economic justice and equity, equal rights and entitlements. But unfortunately, neither the spirit of this doctrine could be institutionalized in our public life, nor the ibadat, despite their inclusive mode of practices, could generate inclusive and participative attitudes in our public and societal life. Daron S. Moglu and James A. Robinson, in their encyclopedic book titled Why Nations Fail, have concluded that nations fail when they have extractive or non-inclusive economic institutions supported by extractive political institutions that impede and even block economic growth. Discussion today will be focused on historic review of the Muslims' decadence with the perspective of the analysis given in this book, and negligence of the Muslims in pursuance of Islamic teachings for establishing inclusive institutions based on equalitarian principles. So, dear friends, the Quran, Sunnah, and the farewell sermon of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have provided very strong basis for the doctrine of equality in the socio-economic and political spheres of the Muslim societies. I may share some of such references here. 1. Our tiny planet is part of the universe, which sustains on a system based on internal cohesion, order, and fairly participative board. Thus, it requires same discipline down the line for its sustainability and progress. 2. In the light of Quran, the man is to perform 2 types of obligations. One to his Allah and the other to his fellow beings. To seek Allah's will, the man is desired to establish justice, order, and socio-economic equity. These obligations have been made integral part of faith to achieve the status of righteousness. Righteousness. Muttaqoon. Some of the Quranic references in this respect are displayed on the screen. Please study them at your leisure time, at your disposal. Number 3, the Quran directs, instructs the man to build the system of collective well-being on such principles which could eliminate every kind of injustice, imbalances, and inequalities so that all elements of society could receive equal rights and fulfill their obligations willingly and happily. It was, in fact, the spirit behind the prophetic mission. Prophets came for this purpose. So, number 4, the Quran presents golden principles of a balanced life that ensures both sustainability of social peace and personal freedoms in this life and salvation in the hereafter. These principles urge the Muslims to employ available resources for the progress of humanity through inclusive and competitive institutions ensuring socio-economic equity and fair play. Fair play. Number 5, individual interest is recognized for operational efficiency, but it promotes concentration of wealth and economic disequilibrium. To check its negative effect, Quran devises assured measures to promote socio-economic equity, equality of all the citizens for civic rights and entitlements. This is one measure, one type of measures. And rejection of interest, second category. And promotion of zakat and charity are worthy of special mention. There are several other measures, but these 3 categories are very important. 6, the principles of equality of men and women without distinction of color, caste, they are equal. Men and women of any color, of any caste. Second, abrogation of slavery. Indiscriminate socio-economic security and equity of the people, and fair dispensation of justice presented by the Quran and the farewell sermon 1400 years ago were surely much more comprehensive and radical in their spirit than those devised through Magna Carta process of 1215, Glorious Revolution of 1688, and French Revolution of 1789, and People's Charter 1838. It means the standards set by the farewell sermon of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Quran are much superior than the standards settled and given by all these processes later on. 7, the Quran gives emphasis on settling the societal affairs by mutual consultation. Mutual consultation. Consulting all the stakeholders. Criteria of mutual consultation applied in line with the Quranic instructions on justice, equity, order, human rights, and collective well-being can meet the essentials, basic needs of inclusive and democratic decision making in the public affairs in the modern context. 8. Ibadat train the performers, train the believers to build a coherent, faithful society working together for collective well being, justice, equity, peace, prosperity, and protection of human rights without distinction of culture, color, and race, focusing on glorious reward of the hereafter. The mosque, Kaaba, zakat, and charity are wonderful institutions for spiritual and social coherence of the Muslim society. Besides that, they provide opportunities. Ibadat, Kaaba, mosque, they provide opportunities for mutual benefit and collective well being of the community. Economic equilibrium promotes social cohesion and national stability, addressing class hatred and poverty based social risks. So, dear friends, now if we have a cursory view of the Muslims' history, we will find some very serious flaws in the constitution and governance of the Muslim societies. The system of transfer of power, very important. The system of transfer of power set by the righteous caliphs at Medina was based on the Qur'anic prescription of mutual consultation. It was a great initiative. It was a great initiative in the given circumstances. But it had intrinsic weaknesses required to be reformed for evolving a merit based representative system for peaceful transfer of power, which unfortunately never happened. Never happened. Rather, despotic rule was perpetuated by various tribal elites. However, dark shadows of the Roman, Persian, Arab syndrome never faded over the Muslim socio-political horizons. Despotic and elitist rule always inculcated evils like determinism, intellectual stagnation, extractive governance, socio-economic inequalities, etc., for their own survival and perpetuation of their rule. Despotic ruling elites were aware, they were conscious of the charismatic spirit of the Quranic teachings, which in the past had led the Muslims in fighting out socio-economic disequilibrium, dismantling elitist distinctions and privileges, and granting equal civic rights to every segment of society. They had always been apprehensive, fearful of the fact that this humanistic and equalitarian spirit of Islam may ignite again, may flare up again to burn them into ashes, to burn the elitist into ashes. Thus, to mitigate, abolish any possibility of resurgence of this spirit as a formidable force again, they had persistently been employing all possible fallacies, deceptions, trickeries, and other unfair means to corrupt its spiritual and intellectual lifeline. These elites were also supported by the enemies of Islam who had been defeated in the war fields, and they found it convenient to seek revenge by camouflaging themselves as Muslims. Thus, all these forces joined hands to drag the Muslim community into sectarian quagmire, perpetual internal strife, socio-economic stratification, and intellectual stagnation. Later on, restrictive policies of the colonial rulers on freedom of speech, thought, and intellectual discourse, and curbing and abolishing and pressurizing on inclusive economic institutions and pluralistic political trends further deepened socio-economic and political decadence in the Muslim world. So, dear friends, the authors of previously referred book, Why Nations Fail, The Origin of Power, Prosperity and Poverty, authors have analyzed why some nations could reach the heights of prosperity, while majority of others are still stuck up in the poverty trap. Countries such as Great Britain, UK, and the United States of America became rich because their citizens overthrew the elites who controlled power through extractive institutions. And they created a society with inclusive institutions. With inclusive means participative and democratic type institutions, where political power was much more broadly distributed, not concentrated, broadly distributed, where the government was accountable to the citizens and where the great mass of people could take advantage of economic opportunities. This process of change in Great Britain was initiated in 1215 with the signing of Magna Carta Charter to curtail the royal powers in imposing taxes without consulting the public representatives. They challenged the royal powers. They fought for that. Masses. This long drawn struggle for political rights and evolution of inclusive politico-economic institutions achieved its great historic benchmark in 1688, popularly known as Glorious Revolution, which attained its apex, reached to its apex in the form of People's Charter in 1838 in United Kingdom by virtue of mass struggle of the people. This strenuous and popular struggle not only revolutionized the political system by adopting inclusive, pluralistic, and democratic pattern of institutions, but this changed political environment also initiated the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century. This process, Glorious Revolution and Industrial Revolution, this process brought great heights of both the pluralistic governance and prosperity together in UK. Similar glorious movement was observed in Europe after the occurrence of French Revolution in 1789, and in USA such movement was initiated in 1774 with the slogan "No taxation without representation." You know, this was the slogan which got independence for US in 1776. Thus, this was a wonderful prescription. This was wonderful prescription. What was the wonderful prescription? Mass movement by the people to get the parliamentary, democratic, inclusive systems. This was the wonderful prescription. So, this was the wonderful prescription pursued by all those top democracies enjoying highest level of prosperity and political stability. It were the peoples. It were the peoples. In fact, peoples are the custodian of their countries, not the elites. It were the peoples of these countries who fought against the elitists' extractive politico-economic institutions, privileges, and distinctions to build pluralistic and democratic societies, ensuring fair distribution of national economic wealth. These movements are guiding lights for us. I repeat, these movements are guiding lights for us, beacon light, to learn the lesson how we can get democratic and inclusive systems. Dear friends, the peoples of these developed countries started their struggle for equalitarian and pluralistic principles with the first visible landmark of Magna Carta Charter in 1215. Keep in mind the date, the year 1215. Whereas the Muslims, we the Muslims, were given much superior framework of equalitarian principles, human rights, and consultative governance at the outset of 7th century AD through the verses of Quran and the farewell sermon as mentioned earlier. Then question is, very, very important question. Then why the Muslims could not employ these guiding principles for developing some pluralistic political system that could have provided a mechanism for peaceful transfer of power with sustainable state apparatus and a stable, fair, and progressive governance framework through inclusive institutions. Why we could not employ these golden principles? In my humble opinion, it has either been ignorance of our religious leadership that they could not understand the humanistic, pluralistic, equalitarian and progressive spirit of Islam expounded in the verses of Quran and the farewell sermon. One, or if they were not ignorant, then what? Or they have been maliciously implementing the legacy of socio-political divide emanating from the old Roman, Persian, Arab syndrome initially seen during the days of battles of Jamal and Siffin in the 7th century AD. For the deception of innocent masses, this socio-political divide had been cunningly carved into sectarian divide or sectarianism. Thus, the religious leadership kept the Muslims engrossed in the sectarian predicament so overwhelmingly that they could hardly find opportunity to know the progressive and evolutionary mode of Islam ever. Despotic elites patronized such religious disorientations to perpetuate their rule based on socio-religious divisions, intellectual degradation, and extractive institutions. As we discussed earlier, despotic ruling elites have always been afraid of the revival of the humanistic and equalitarian spirit of Islam. They, as the history witnessed, never allowed pluralistic institutions that could lead to peaceful transfer of power. They never encouraged inclusive economic institutions that could ensure fair, equitable, and merit based distribution of economic opportunities, and mostly kept the freedom of thought under strict control to avoid awakening of humanistic and equalitarian spirit of Islam against their despotic elitist rule through extractive institutions. Despite humanistic, pluralistic, and equalitarian spirit of Islam, religious opposition to such extractive institutional framework could hardly be seen except a very few individual efforts. Likewise, despite having wonderful heritage of humanistic, pluralistic, and equalitarian traditions set by the Quranic teachings and the farewell sermon, no mass movement could ever be initiated by the common peoples on the pattern of glorious revolution or French Revolution throughout the Muslim history, with a few exceptions in recent times, that too not of much worthwhile reckoning. So, dear friends, horrifying consequences of these failures can be witnessed in socio-intellectual and politico-economic degradation of the Muslim world even today. Islamic Republic of Pakistan, who claims to be champion of Islam, is among the topmost corrupt countries, ranked at 144 in the list of 180 as reported by Transparency International this year. First clean Islamic country is at 22nd position, which means top 21 clean countries are non-Muslims. Oh, shameful. Whereas 8 top corrupt positions are held by the Muslim countries. In the evaluation by Freedom in the World for 2021, hardly 2 Muslim countries qualify as having electoral democracies of desired standards. On Human Rights Index 2021, reported by the Human Freedom, Pakistan stands at 145th position, and so are most of other Muslim countries. As a result, none of Muslim countries is among 20 OECD wealthy countries or permanent members of United Nations Security Council. They don't qualify for those honorable positions. Poverty, illiteracy, and social insecurity is the hallmark of most of the Muslim countries. So it is my humble appeal to every responsible Muslim, especially my young friends, to hold the steering wheel of the sinking ship of the Muslim Ummah in their own hands, to pull it away from the marshlands of socio-economic and political decadence by fighting out sectarian divide, moral and intellectual stagnation caused by taqleed, religious rigidities, conceptual disorientations, and deterministic mindset, and lead this ship and lead it to the glorious path of peace, prosperity, and freedom by striking hard to build inclusive and pluralistic socio-economic and political institutions based on the Qur'anic principles of justice, equity, consultation, common good, socio-religious harmony, and progressive mindset. So, dear friends, with this we conclude our discussion here. These programs are recorded both in Urdu and English. Their videos can be watched on the ideafoundation.com.pk website or its YouTube channel and Facebook. Their written versions are also available on the Idea Foundation's website. Please note code number of this program, Idea 1B R28 or lecture number 133. All friends are requested to subscribe the Foundation's YouTube web channel for the benefit of this noble cause. Thank you friends for participation. Allah Hafiz.